Welcome to New Jersey Exit Interviews, the podcast all about New Jersey, America's greatest state. My name is David Pigero. I grew up in Central Jersey, in Ewing, and I'm currently living in the beautiful, if slightly frozen, Jersey City. Today we're talking with Jay Vaingankar, a 28-year-old Central Jersey clean energy and affordability-focused candidate. He's running in New Jersey's 12th Congressional District. He worked in the White House and within the U.S. Department of Energy, and most recently in community solar. He's a University of Pennsylvania alum, was born and raised in the district, and entered the race soon after Bonnie Watson-Coleman announced she's retiring. So hi, Jay. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thanks, David. Good to be here.
Thank you. So I think the best way to start out is just to hear a little bit about your background, how you grew up, what New Jersey means to you, and kind of, some early life.
Yeah, my parents came to the United States in the 90s from India. My dad had bounced around on H-1B and lived in 47 different states before finally deciding New Jersey was the best one of all the ones he had picked. And I was born and raised here in Mercer County, grew up in a community that spoke 63 different languages, picked up Spanish, and just saw how the language you speak at home or the color of your skin or the neighborhood you grew up in often determines your destiny. And that took me on a community organizing journey, not just in my own high school, where we fought how our detention system was more focused on being punitive than actually mentoring and solving some of the deeper social challenges, but also going beyond and getting involved in campaign politics, going to college in Philly, getting involved in Pennsylvania races, and then ultimately bridging the two when I worked for President Biden's first presidential campaign in 2020 to bring so many volunteers from Jersey over the river into Bucks and really flip the White House and begin my true organizing journey there too. And that brought me to the White House, where I was appointed to lead on COVID operations and then on clean energy investment in the Department of Energy. And no matter where my journey took me, whether it was around the country, my journey always brought me home. On the Amtrak, on the weekends, back to this community where I was born and raised, back to Trenton Transit Center. And those trips and being back here full time have shown me that New Jersey is the best place in the world to live, work, raise a family, to grow up. And that American dream that my parents sought, whether they gave up their lives back in India, moved thousands of miles away from their families, is at risk now because the cost of living has skyrocketed in this country. And in Washington, we've got a gerontocracy focused on corporate greed that cuts our healthcare funding to give money to ICE and jack up our utility costs by cutting clean energy funding. And so I think it's time for a new generation to fix it. And I'm really excited to be here today to share more about my story and the campaign that we're building, because I think we're seeing support from all over the 32 towns in the district that it's time for some new energy in our politics.
Got it. No, thank you. So now you grew up in was it Hightstown or East Windsor?
Yeah, so Hightstown, East Windsor, it's like a donut kind of community. So we got Hightstown Borough where the high school was, and then East Windsor circling around it, yeah.
Okay, so I know one theme that I've been talking about recently on the podcast is just, the kind of multitude of New Jersey's small towns with their kind of distinct culture, distinct vibe, I guess. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about Hightstown, East Windsor, and just kind of what it was like growing up there, going to high school there.
Totally. I loved being born and raised here in Central Jersey, proudly living off Exit 8 on the Turnpike. And what I've seen is the story that you see all over, not just Mercer, but all over Central Jersey, which is that if you grew up off I-95 or off this section of the state, you probably went to a high school that spoke dozens of different languages, where you could walk the hallways in the beginning of the school day, at the end of the school day, and just hear multiple languages, hear multiple types of conversations, whether folks were worried about their utility bills or their parents' immigration status, or everything from the food they were going to eat tonight. And that diversity, I think, showed me very early on that no matter where you come from or what you look like, all of our destinies are intertwined, and that we're all involved in the same challenges, the same issues. And we've seen this more recently, right? I mean, when a child is separated from their family because of an ICE raid, that affects all of our safety, whether you're an American citizen or not. If there's someone who can't afford their healthcare costs because insulin costs are skyrocketing because insurance companies are trying to price gouge. That affects all of us, even if I'm not a diabetic patient. So I think that diversity, not just racially, but also linguistically, socioeconomically, I think taught me very early on how all of our lives ultimately affect each other at the end of the day.
Oh, definitely. And I guess another theme that I've been talking a lot about recently has been, New Jersey is interesting in that we have New York up north and kind of Philly down south. So, after high school, you go to University of Pennsylvania. And I guess, Central Jersey is, like you, believe in Central Jersey, where I think we're kind of either free from the gravitational pull of both New York or Philly, or maybe we're a little bit of our own thing. But I guess, what did you learn about maybe South Jersey when you were at UPenn, or kind of did Penn and Philadelphia feel different than New Jersey, or were there a lot of similarities?
Well, I think one of my favorite parts of going to school in Philly was that it was so close to home, but just far enough away where you could kind of get that separation and learn about what life is like when you can't go home to your parents every night. And I think one of my favorite parts, especially from that, was, I started college in the fall of 2016, right? Everyone has so much nostalgia for 2016 right now. Like, it was sort of our last year of sanity. And I had all these big hopes and dreams of, trying to go to law school and becoming a civil rights attorney. And I was so excited to see what President Hillary Clinton would do. And I watched when Trump won, how so much of those hopes and dreams that so many people were riding on collapsed. And, being in Philly, I went and organized for Hillary in West Philly in 2016. And I wouldn't say that I predicted that Trump would win, but you could feel the lack of enthusiasm in the community, that people said, look, Democrats have been in power for 8 years. My life has not improved. The rent is higher. The water is still not safe to drink in so many parts of the city. How is my life getting better, and why should I still continue to vote for Democrats? And I think I've watched as our party has struggled to make that case to working people, and we've seen really, really dire consequences from that. And we've seen also too many people in our party point the finger at the communities that are suffering the most, as if we're entitled to their votes because they look a certain way or have a certain income bracket. And so being in Philly, I think, taught me that very, very much firsthand, being in a swing state. And the best part of it was that I could go home on the weekends, tell friends and family, hey, just an hour from us is a very different world where people don't feel like they're an automatic vote blue no matter who kind of voter. And that translated to later in my organizing career when I graduated into a pandemic. I got hundreds of moms, aunties, people of all ages coming over the river to come volunteer with me in Bucks County to ultimately flip Pennsylvania. So that connection back to home always persisted even when I left home, which I think was my favorite part of being in Philly.
No, definitely makes sense. And then kind of continuing on chronologically, I guess I'd love to hear a little bit more about your time in Washington, what you focused on, what are some of your kind of proudest achievements, and just what life was like there.
Yeah. So my time in D.C. was very unexpected, right? I had just graduated college. I was 6 months out of school. We had just organized on a winning presidential campaign. The pandemic was ravaging our communities. If you remember, it let up ever so slightly in the summer of 2020, and then it just ravaged right back up in the winter. So it was just a cold, dark winter. And ultimately, I think because of the organizing prowess that came from all these folks and volunteers from New Jersey, the White House appointed me to their management and administration team, where we did a ton of operational work, a lot of it related to COVID operations, making sure the campus was safe during a pandemic. And being in the White House, you see what is such high priority for the federal government that it makes it past a federal agency and goes all the way up to the president's desk, whether it's a specific type of meeting, decisions that need to get made. And I was a junior staffer. I started off at the very lowest rung on the ladder. And very quickly they tell you, there's no job that's below you, there's no job that's above you. You are going to be expected to do everything because we are in a state of chaos. We have to rebuild a country after the president for the previous 4 years tried to tear it apart. And the biggest thing I learned, David, is that I learned this in the White House and the Department of Energy, is that you hear all this mythology about how government is not useful, it's slow, it's inefficient, so we should just cut it, we should fire people. What I learned very quickly is that government is very efficient wherever there's political capital, right? If we wanted to bomb a country this evening, the military could be there to do it, right? if we wanted to produce a vaccine in 8 months to wind down a pandemic, we could do it in 8 months, right? And so government is capable of doing incredible things, both the good and the bad. And I think that made me so much more progressive and so much more expansionary in my vision for what we could do for this country, because we are capable of building and scaling up a ton of new housing to lower the cost of rent and mortgages. We are capable of building a ton of clean energy to make sure that AI data centers don't jack up our energy costs. We're capable of making sure everyone can have healthcare in the richest country in the world. And there are people who have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo because they profit from it or they just socially benefit from it. And they have put out this myth that like government is entirely slow, doesn't do anything. And that's true. If there's no political capital somewhere, then you deal with bureaucracy, you deal with slowness. But the biggest thing it taught me, and a big reason I wanted to run for this office, is that if we build the political capital, if we build the movement, that we can do incredibly amazing things in the federal government. We just need leaders who have the courage to be able to get it done.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I think I'll try to focus in on a few of the different maybe policy areas that you mentioned. So obviously New Jersey is a super expensive state.
Yeah.
You mentioned kind of an abundance-focused idea of, building a lot more housing. So I guess I'm curious, kind of, I guess, your thoughts on that, like the best policy solutions, and I guess how the federal government, I guess specifically Congress, can work hand in glove or arm in arm with state or local officials to try to get that cost of housing down.
Yeah. I think you see this with housing, you see this with energy, you see this with any source of social good that we have been convinced is scarce and that we have to be careful about how we distribute it. And I think we've learned over the last couple of years that really strong government investment funded by making sure the wealthy pay their fair share to grow the amount that we're producing, I think is the best way to actually grow supply and cut costs. So housing and energy are two great examples. So I personally worked on a lot of clean energy investment when I was at the Department of Energy. We found that if you create tax credits and create incentives for people to build, whether it's more solar, more nuclear, you can increase supply, and that's the best way to lower costs. It's the same thing with housing. I think we've seen Democrats push a lot of programs like down payment assistance, trying to give people money so they can afford to buy a home. And I think that's good in terms of trying to compensate for inequality, whether someone's been a victim of redlining or trying to compensate for people of very low income backgrounds by taxing the rich. But we have to be careful about subsidizing demand, right? Because that's ultimately just profit for real estate developers. The best way we can have a check on landlords is by building more housing. And, I'm running for a federal office. A lot of housing decisions are made on the state and local level. So I'll tell you what we can do on the federal level, which is that we can remove the barriers that artificially make housing really expensive. So the first thing is Trump's tariffs, right? The tariffs on lumber, on steel, the deportations of innocent workers, the visa restrictions. I mean, all of these factors just make it difficult that when a house is already permitted to be built, it jacks up the cost by 10, 20, 30%. And the renter pays for that, the mortgage holder, the homeowner pays for that. And so that's one of the first and most important things. And then we also have a really incredible opportunity to do major permitting reform. And I feel like we've been convinced into this binary where you either have a ton of environmental protections and nothing can get built, or you go all the way to the other end of the spectrum and you have zero environmental protections and just build whatever, no questions asked. And one thing we worked on a lot when I was at DOE was finding ways to streamline the permitting process, whether we were using AI to review a ton of environmental impact statements or actually considering what laws actually protect the environment versus making people who have a ton of corporate lawyers on their team really wealthy and gatekeeping a lot of people from that space. So there's multiple angles, I think, to building more energy, building more housing, permitting more transit, construction. So those are some of the initial ideas there.
Oh, super interesting. Yeah, I know. People throw around NEPA reform. I think I try to be somewhat neutral here, but I think NEPA reform would be a great thing. And I guess also just not even politically, just I was an econ major. Were you also an econ major or?
Yeah, so at the Wharton School, okay. I got a BS in economics. Yeah.
Great. Yep. So I feel like that's hearing there's can be problems with subsidizing demand without increasing supply is
right.
music to my
ears,
at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense. I think so. On energy, you were at the Department of Energy. I think I certainly feel the rate increases recently. So my parents, I'm from NJ-12. My parents live in Ewing. I went home, I think like 2 weeks ago, and I saw the energy bill, and I was like, that's insane. So I guess, you mentioned solar, you mentioned nuclear. I think those both make a lot of sense. I guess it'd be interesting to hear maybe a few more details on some of the solar that you worked on, what kind of community solar is, and I don't know, different ideas about anything from storage to more generation and maybe other reforms that could make energy costs even less. I almost said in Ewing, in New Jersey.
Right. And the biggest challenge as to why our energy costs are skyrocketing is it's not just a lack of supply, it's that New Jersey is an energy importer state. So we are dependent on a regional grid operator, this entity called PJM, right? And energy breaks so many of the rules of economics because we have to have these utilities, these grid operators have to be monopolies, right? Because you can't have multiple transmission lines competing with each other. So in order for a company like PJM to operate our grid, they have to, quote, justify their monopoly by making sure prices rise at a certain rate. And they failed to be accountable to that. I mean, the PJM has so many fossil fuel executives on their board that have a vested interest in slowing the rate at which new projects come online, because if they create scarcity, then prices stay up. And so if they make it harder in other states for new projects to come online, that makes it way easier to jack up costs here in New Jersey. And so there's two things we've got to do. On the federal level, we've got to actually hold PJM accountable, right? We need to make sure the interconnection queue actually gets new projects online way faster. And we also need to do way more grid modernization to make that logistically possible. But at the local level, I mean, we have to also skyrocket the amount of distributed generation we're doing, which means in the local communities, how are we building new energy? So this is what I did working in community solar. If the solar is produced down the street, whether it's in a ground-mounted solar farm or on a commercial rooftop, that lowers so many costs of transmission, and then we don't have to be dependent on a regional grid operator. So put simply, if we build local, prices go down, right? If we build more, prices go down. And the building of clean energy is so beneficial because it creates family-sustaining, often union jobs, and those jobs are local, and the actual externalities of building it make it easier to combat climate change. They lower costs for all of us. So you don't see the same sort of challenges with development that you might see with other industries that pollute our air or water or take a lot of our natural resources. So those are some of the initial ideas. I think that there's stuff you can do on the federal level. There's stuff you can do on the local level. I'm super proud that the governor, that Mikey Sherrill, has really prioritize energy costs as one of her top issues. And what I want to do in the federal government is ensure that New Jersey is doing everything, but that we can also be a good partner. And ultimately, the most important thing we can do, David, is restore and go beyond the clean energy incentives that President Biden and House and Senate Democrats implemented 4 years ago, or about 4 years ago. And that means if you build a solar farm, you get money for it, and that money is paid for by the wealthiest, right? If you build a nuclear plant or you invest in electric vehicles, we want to skyrocket these industries, because if we don't, other countries like China, countries around the world, are going to own the green tech monopoly, and the transition away from fossil fuels is inevitable, and I want America to lead it. I want American jobs. I want New Jerseyan jobs to lead it.
For sure. I think that all makes sense. I think one thing that I think NJ-12 constituents are familiar with is, you mentioned Princeton Junction. When I was at Princeton, my girlfriend lived with me, and she would commute to the city for work in the mornings, at least 3 days a week.
Oh, Lord.
And sometimes the delays would be pretty bad. So, totally acceptable answer if that is very much a state. I know NJ Transit is a state entity, and, Port Authority is between New York and New Jersey. But I guess I think we see now with the Portal Tunnel that there is obviously, federal funding matters for NJ Transit and New Jersey infrastructure. So I guess I'm curious, do you think there are things that can be done on the federal level to improve NJ Transit and make commuting more tolerable? Totally.
And the first thing to answer your question, David, is that a lot of the infrastructure of NJ Transit, particularly the Northeast Corridor, is owned by Amtrak. So we are at the mercy of federal investments for the highest traffic train line in our state. So the first thing that we've seen, right, from this administration is threatening and now cutting funding for the Gateway Tunnel. I mean, every commuter in the state, anyone who's been to New York on the trains, has experienced the hell of being stuck in that tunnel. You don't have cell service, you're stuck there, you don't know what's going to happen. And building the Gateway Tunnel is a way to alleviate that bottleneck and create thousands of jobs at the same time. I mean, it is such an economic boon for our state because New Jersey workers power New York City. And so much of our economy has grown because of the Northeast Corridor. I mean, my dad was on the train every morning. I mean, my mom was a daycare worker and a bank teller, and my dad would get on the train in New York in an IT job every morning at 6 a.m. And so my life is only possible because of that NJ Transit commute on the Northeast Corridor. And so the issue is very personal to me. And, you know, when I would come home on the weekends from DC, I would take the Northeast Corridor from the other direction on Amtrak. And so I've just seen how the federal neglect and the fossil fuel interests that want to keep everyone flying on planes or being in cars and ignoring our trains has resulted in a system that so many people depend on and can't get out of, but is still slowing us down and frustrating us. I mean, to your point, David, every one of us have experienced the summer of hell, where all these heat-related failures freeze, no pun intended, our trains, right? And this is just such an unacceptable status quo that one of the most widely used train systems in the entire country just shuts down every summer for hours at a time because the federal government has neglected those investments. And this is a huge reason why I'm running, David, and why I particularly wanted to run for this office, is because we need someone who can navigate federal agencies, who can navigate these federal funding fights. You know, there are lots of people who can take the fight to Pete Hegseth and condemn Trump and condemn the awful things that are coming out of this administration. I think there's many qualified people to do that. Where I think the most important job of a member of Congress is to go to Washington and fight for New Jersey to get federal resources home. That you know who in Amtrak to call up, who on the committee that you need to have a debate with or build a relationship with to actually get that funding for the Northeast Corridor. That is the most important job. And Bonnie Watson-Coleman was an incredible champion at this. I mean, as a progressive icon, someone sitting on House appropriations, she knew how to bring home money to one of the most highest tax states in the country. That's a donor state. I mean, we give more money to the federal government than we receive. And so our train system is just the tip of the spear. I mean, the lack of federal investment in New Jersey is staggering. And the Gateway Tunnel, I think, is going to force a lot of people in our state to consider, you know, what is the value of voting for Republicans when all they do is cut funding for our healthcare and our transit, throw it into ICE, and then terrorize, deport, and sometimes murder our neighbors. So that's the big challenge that we're seeing here.
Got it. And I'd like to, since you mentioned Bonnie Watson-Coleman, dive into some of the politics of NJ-12. So
Sure.
I'm kind of curious when you kind of first thought about running is the right question, or I think maybe that is the right first question. So yeah, what's kind of, if you walk me through your own kind of personal decision making, when did you kind of think, oh, this is a great chance to throw your hat into the ring?
Yeah, I mean, throughout my life, I've been blessed in a very diverse community as a community organizer. I mean, everything from battling the school to prison pipeline to electoral organizing to when I moved back here full time, working in community solar, and even during my time in DC, taking those trips home to work with mayors and county officials and faith leaders to apply for those clean energy grants. I think my entire life has been focused on public service. The question I always have to ask myself is, where do I best fit in the ecosystem, right? When Trump won his first election in 2016, I dedicated myself to campaign politics. I said, the Democratic Party needs to figure out how to run campaigns better. When we ultimately got into office and we said, okay, how do we actually fix the damage and go way beyond to build back better, as the president would say, from Trump, I was invested deeply in the clean energy transition and helping calm down and ultimately end the pandemic, right? And so this past year, you know, I'm back here in the community that I grew up in, and I am in my childhood bedroom, right? I I feel like people in my generation, we did everything we were told we were supposed to do, right? We worked hard in school, we went to good colleges, we got good jobs, and we can't afford to buy homes in the communities that we grew up in, even at the same age that our parents bought their homes, right? And I'm watching the average age of a homeowner balloon all the way up to 40, in some states 49 years old. And I talk to people, not just my age, but my parents' age, who say, my grandchildren are going to get raised in Texas or Florida because the state does not give a shit about people your guys' age. That even if you save really hard and you find the right home on the market and you're able to buy a home, then you look at the property taxes, you look at the utility rates, you look at the healthcare premiums, and life just becomes so unaffordable. And David, the most staggering stat I learned that I feel every day, but to see it in numbers was so staggering, is that New Jersey has the highest rate in the country of people our age still living with our parents. So age 25 to 35, 43% of us are living with our parents. It is not only the highest in the country, it's twice the national average. And so New Jersey has to ask itself, like, are we building a state that is going to actually be there for the next generation? And I look at all these challenges of folks leaving to other parts of the country, folks staying isolated in their parents' parents' house, in their childhood bedroom, and that to me is a stark reminder that it is time for a new generation, that we need a voice that can bring new energy into our politics. So that was the biggest inspiration for me to run, to just see not just the generational divide, but the class divide, the racial divide, and whether or not you can afford this state that we all love and be part of the American dream is just really alarming to me. And that's why I needed to step up and why I decided to run.
That definitely makes sense. I know that not super long ago, Senator Andy Kim's lawsuit, ended the county line. And accordingly, NJ-12, there are lots and lots of hats in the ring. I think maybe Sue Altman announced yesterday or something along those lines. And I think now we're up to 16 or something. That's something like that. So I guess which I think is exciting. Lots of debate, lots of
democracy.
Ideas.
Yeah,
for sure. So I guess I'm curious what your take is on the primary process without the county line.
Yeah.
And I mean, in this race, I guess maybe it's hard to reflect on something that you're living in, but it's super interesting to me. I mean, such a really crowded race, lots of different people. I guess one last part of this question: do you think the race is going to be very regional? Are there regional power bases? Do you think it'll be kind of, we're both the same age, we're 28, kind of lots of differences among the age groups, or kind of how do you see the race and kind of your own lane maybe, or maybe other competitors' lanes?
Totally. I love this question. And, I am a community organizer, political organizer at heart. So I'm thinking about these questions all the time because we want to run a campaign that is like true to my values and true to, I think, what people in New Jersey are looking for. And, I look up to Andy Kim as such a role model. I'm very proud to have alumni of his campaign team working on our campaign because we, I think, tell a very incredible story of that. You can grow up in this state, you can be privileged enough that your public school gives you the tools to achieve some of the coolest projects all around the world, but at the end of the day, no matter where your journey takes you, you always want to come home. Every weekend, back to the community that raised you. And I think his campaign showed us that people don't want to be told by anyone who to vote for. They want to make that decision for themselves. And so to your question about, without the line, there's no godfather, godmother type candidate or type figure that can consolidate the field. I think, look, this is the beauty of democracy, right? That in the United States of America, everyone has the right to run for office. And I think the question now in a very crowded field is who has the ability to garner support and put in the work, right? Can you get that grassroots support? Can you get those petition signatures? And that's been the most exciting part about doing this, right? I mean, your relationships in the community matter. I've been volunteering with the Democratic Party like ever since I was in high school. I'm not someone who's foreign to the party system. I came up through it. And it's an incredible way to organize folks and to stay united against a fascist Republican Party. And so this is an incredible opportunity here to have someone who came up through the system but isn't beholden to any specific person or any kind of special interest. Because I think people want to make the decision for themselves on who to vote for.
No, definitely. And I guess this is just, I'm kind of curious just in some of the logistics of it. So the fact that you are, you've done the paperwork, you're running. So before that, you had to get, is it 500 or 250 signatures?
500. Mm-hmm.
500.
Yeah.
And you've done that. That is done.
I'm sure we're going to get like more than 500 signatures. I mean, we've got volunteers in our district all around in all 4 counties, going around with our clipboard, building on their relationships, showing people our launch video, saying like, this guy looks like my son. Like, I want someone who looks like my son or daughter to represent me in Congress. And so that on the ground effort, I think, takes some real organizing. It takes long-term relationships. It's something that money cannot buy. And we're really excited about that. And to your earlier question, David, about like, in a crowded field, how do you differentiate yourself, right? I think like the traditional consultant advice is like, oh, you got to like go talk to a bunch of special interests, get a ton of money, and then flood the airwaves with ads, right? For me, it's all about highlighting my story, right? And we need to highlight the fact that there are so many people in our district and in our state and in our country who are at risk of not having a chance at the American dream because things are so unaffordable. And that's what's firing people up. Not just saying that things are bad, but also having a vision to say, wow, here's how we can get better. Investing in clean energy, achieving universal health care, building more housing. And so, look, I'm the youngest person in this race, right? I'm 28 years old. I'm the only person in this race who has worked in a federal agency, who's worked in the White House, has navigated the federal government in Washington, D.C., which I think is the most important qualification you'd want for someone that we'd send regularly to Washington. I'm a proud son of immigrants, proud son of South Asian, Desi, Indian immigrants. And I think we just have a really unique story to tell here. I mean, I grew up speaking fluent Spanish because I was raised in a community with so many folks from all over the world. And I think that my story is reflective of the best of New Jersey, that you can grow up here, be enriched in such a diverse, strong, progressive environment, and go on to achieve anything as long as you're willing to work hard.
No, totally makes sense. One more logistical question:
Mm-hmm.
What is the day-to-day like of somebody that's running for Congress? What does the calendar look like?
Yeah.
What fills the hours?
Yeah, the best part of being a young candidate for office is everyone that has raised me, taught me, that grew up with me is still here in the community. And so, I thought at first it would be a little awkward to call a high school or middle school classmate I hadn't talked to in 15 years, but they are so excited to say, wow, like I grew up with you. I used to think that going to Congress is something that only like the top tier elites could do. You had to be some kind of celebrity beforehand, but someone I grew up with is doing it. That's so exciting to me. I mean, I just caught up the other day with my 3rd grade teacher. My kindergarten teacher just liked one of my Facebook posts. We're catching up later this week. I mean, that ability to walk down memory lane and just call up every single person you've ever met in your life is such a whirlwind of just like a philosophical like walk through your entire life's experience, and a reminder that everyday people should be going to Congress, that this is not a job that should be reserved for folks who have millions of dollars or are at a certain age that they feel like they've checked off certain boxes in life. So, that's one part of it, just talking to the people I grew up with, right? Trying to spread the word as much as possible. So that helps us get a good base in all 4 counties in the district. But then we also want to meet as many new people as possible, right? We've been crisscrossing the district, organizing in all 32 towns, communicating our policies. Like, we're not just here to just say like ICE is terrible. Like, we're here to say like, hey, this is our plan. We're going to abolish ICE and make sure this is how we properly enforce our immigration laws. And it's really building relationships because we are so early in the election cycle, right? I mean, we still have CD11, right? That's about to finish up this week. Every day is some sort of dopamine spiking, adrenaline spiking headline of chaos. And we have to do a lot of listening, right? But as we develop the details of our policy plans, We want to hear about what voters are actually thinking. And, when I was working in DC, one of my favorite parts of coming home on weekends was that I can get out of the Beltway bubble. Because what happens in like Northwest DC and what people are thinking in that world is very different than what everyday folks who go to the grocery store every week and see those prices go up are actually experiencing. And so there's a lot of, a breadth of experiences that we have to reach out to and listen to. And, as a young candidate, someone who is just so passionate about these issues, we're willing to show up everywhere. Like, we're willing to do 3 events in one night. We're willing to go wherever we can reach out to folks, because that's the kind of congressperson that people deserve.
Great. So then I think maybe one last kind of local question. If somebody was passing through East Windsor, Hightstown, maybe 2 or 3 best places to eat. What's your food recommendations?
Okay. So I've been asked my favorite restaurant so many times, and I have to admit that my 2 favorite restaurants are more on the chain side because, growing up, especially during the recession, we didn't have a lot of money. So like whenever we had something to celebrate, like a good report card or like a good spelling test result, you could tell I grew up in a family that celebrated those kinds of things. We'd go to Applebee's, we'd go to Taco Bell. And so like those restaurants like have so much nostalgia in my mind. And my favorite restaurant changes like every 6 months, especially because, not to get back into the seriousness of this all, but like because during and after the pandemic, we saw an incredible rate of restaurant closures, right? So many of my favorite restaurants have closed over the years. I think right now, one of my favorite restaurants, and it's been lasting really strongly several years because it's so great, is Borough Bean in Hopewell Borough. They are a wonderful place to not just get a cup of coffee on a cold day, but they have the best scrambled eggs. I think they're better than most of the diners I've gone to. And then my top diner right now, sometimes it rotates, but it's good to always be a regular somewhere, is Somerset Diner. That's one of my top ones. So I think those are the 4 places I think I'd recommend. You got to go to a New Jersey-based food. It's the best.
No, for sure. And one other, I think again it's super early, right? The primary is in June, June of this year, though, June of 2026, right?
Yeah.
Do you know, will there be any debates if people want to hear more or hear you in conversation with the candidates, or are we way too early to know anything about that?
A lot of organizations are independently hosting forums, so we're really excited this Sunday. We're going to head over to the Muslim Center of Greater Princeton for a forum that's sponsored by CARE and Engage. And then the week after, we're going to be at the Princeton Democratic Community Organization, or the Princeton Community Democratic Organization, the PCDO, to have a forum there as well. And I know a lot of other Democratic clubs are going to be hosting their forums as well. And so we're excited to just show up everywhere. If there is a more official debate that's hosted by like a main media organization, we're happy to show up to that too, because I think we're going to need someone who has the ability to articulate these really complex federal challenges and to something more than just sound bites and protest slogans, but also policy plans that can actually deliver for New Jersey. And we're going to be featuring all of this on our social media. I mean, you can follow us at J4Jersey on all platforms. Whenever we're at a candidate forum or a protest, you'll see that video content on our feed.
Got it. That's what I was going to ask. People that want to learn more or follow your campaign, the best way to do that is social media. Yep. J4Jersey, and then is the website also J4Jersey?
The website is jvaingankar.com, but if you just Google like Jay Vaingankar, J4Jersey, you'll find us.
Okay, great. I think thank you so much for your time. It was great to learn more about you and your journey and your plans for Jersey. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David. Really enjoyed this.